Hey everybody. Well, do we have a lot to go over? It has been a little bit since I've done a video. Um, Spring kind of rapidly happened up here in Michigan, and we had a pretty good stint of 70 and 80 degree weather, so a lot of outside stuff going on, a little bit of early spring cleanup, so not as much going on in the shop. But now we're back to a typical spring, which is cold and rainy and just icky. So, where are we at? The last video, I guess let me back up a little bit. For those that follow me on Facebook, know a little bit more of the progress, but those that do not, we got a few more things to cover here. So I believe in the last video I had the fuselage for the most part sheeted. I think all except for the tail section. Um, well, the tail section of the fuselage, that is. And that took the most time, just because of all the odd curves back there and how sharp the bends are, where the push rods and everything are protruding. So that had to be pieced in. So all the sheeting on the fuselage is done except for the underside of the nose area and, of course, the wing fillets. Oh, excuse me. But that can't be done until the wing and center section is complete. So no final sanding, no final shaping yet. Still very rough. I mean, you'll notice that the fuselage looks extremely rough. Where you look at the actual tail section, you can see little remnants of wood filler and all that good stuff. That's nice and smooth. So that will look like that eventually. Anyways, we'll get to these here in a minute. Got the DLE 111 mounted up to the firewall. Firewall's just set in place. For those that have been watching my channel for some time, should remember my third scale Cub that I used to fly and do air shows with at the Warbird and Classic events and a couple other private venues. I sold that airplane back in 2018, I think it was. And this engine hasn't been run since. It's just been sitting. This has been a very, very good engine to me. So I'm glad to finally have another project to put it in. Also, I have received my landing gear from Daryl at Sierra, and a little pricey, but boy, oh boy, are they nice. And the way they mount is pretty interesting. It's a good solid way to do it, but the downside is, well, I'll get into the downside here in a second. As you can see, they mount right up into these blocks. They're supplied with the landing gear. You do not get these with the kit. These come with the landing gear. They're oversized, so you have to have one heck of a good bandsaw to carve these into shape. And unfortunately, I think I took what little bit of life my old man's bandsaw had left to whittle these down. Pretty tough stuff. But as you can see, it mounts in between these two ribs here and right up against the front spar box. So it's a good, strong setup. Now for the downside. Typically, when I put planes together, I make my landing gear situation a weak spot on the airplane. And there's a reason for that. You always hear guys saying, well, when I put my landing gear, my retracts in, I go in and I glass everything and make everything just solid as a rock so it can withstand a hard landing. Well, that's true to a point, but unfortunately, if you're in an emergency situation, um, especially in an airplane like this that does not have retracts, and let's say I have to make an off-runway landing in a kind of a not-so-friendly spot, the way this is all mounted, if this gear pulls out, it's literally going to destroy the airplane because the wing center section is built into the fuselage. It's all permanently attached. It's attached to the front spar box. So if this all gets ripped apart, it literally will destroy the entire airplane. And that's kind of an unsettling feeling. Of course, the most common, remedy to that is don't break it. So, fingers crossed. Anyways, But yeah, they look, the gear is fantastic. Looks really good. That's just awesome. So when I got those mounted up, the blocks that is, I was able to start building the wing, and they went pretty quick and did not go very well. Explanation to follow. So when I originally built these wings, I was not intending on fully sheeting them. What I originally did is I sheeted the leading edge to the front spar, and then I did a strip back here and also the aileron. The gap in there, these actually are just little scabs that I used to temporarily secure the aileron portion of the ribs to the main ribs. These are going to get cut out, and this is where the trailing edge face of the wing and the leading edge of the aileron is going to be. So that's why there's a big gap in there. But I'm going to get everything sheeted, trailing edge, wingtips, everything done on the wing, basically final sanded, ready to go before I cut the ailerons out. Because it's much easier to get everything shaped while it's still somewhat permanently attached. But anyways, so that's where I had sheets laid, and then I went ahead and I cap stripped the ribs because I wanted to keep it lighter, and plus I'm not a fan of sheeting, so I didn't want to sheet the whole wing. But after I put the cap strips on, I really was not happy. And the main reason for that is because of where the leading edge sheeting stops, which is right here on the main spar. It stops more on the downside of the leading edge. So the cap strips actually come up and kind of angle down a little bit. And this is the perfect area to break the covering for the Super Chipmunk color scheme. So you got your white, then the blue on the front, and then of course the red stripes. But to do it properly, I would have had to run the blue further back here over the open bays, and that just would not have looked right. I could have done it a little bit different if I had thought about it, but overall I just wasn't pleased. So I peeled off the cap strips and went ahead and sheeted the tops of the wings. This one here is not finished underneath. We'll look at that in a little bit. And this area here has been left exposed, as you can see here where the wing joins together. Hold on, let me pull this apart real quick. Okay, so now you can see where it separates here. We got our front and rear spar joiners that go into the boxes. So I left this area open for now because I still have to make the mounts that I'm going to use to attach the wing to the center section. So I needed to keep this area opened up for now. It would have been smart if I would have done that before I started the sheeting, but I already know how I'm going to do it. I just don't want to do it right now. Call it lazy, because it is. But anyways, so that's good. No final sanding or filling has been done yet, and I'm not going to until everything is pretty much done. The only thing I did do some filling on is up here on the leading edge, because like I said, this was cap stripped, so the leading edge sheeting was already sanded down a little bit to be flush with the cap strips. So after I peeled those off and sheeted the rest of the wing, I had to kind of blend it up here. So I did that right from the get-go just because I didn't like the way it looked. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah, it's coming together good and it's getting real. So, sheeting these wings was not difficult, but sheeting the bottom becomes somewhat of an issue if you don't know what you're doing. Now, when you build the wings onto the table, at the end of each rib, there's a little tab here and up here, and all the tabs are different lengths, and those tabs secure to your building table and keep the wing at the proper shape, because this has just a little bit of washout at the wingtip. So that keeps those ribs in that specific shape while you sheet it. So when you're done sheeting the top of the wing and you undo it, it's permanently in that shape. However, yes, it is in that shape, but without sheeting on the bottom of the wing, you'll notice it's pretty flimsy because only one side is sheeted. There's no torsional strength. I mean, it's a little bit because of all the sheeting on the top, but you have to be very careful when sheeting the bottom, because when you're sheeting the bottom, if you accidentally start twisting this wing while you're sheeting, you're going to permanently put a nasty twist into it. So I'm going to show you how I do this when you're not supplied with any kind of a jig or something to put the wings in. For those of us that have built top flight kits over the years, remember that you build the wing with the little tabs like always, but then when you flip it over, that most of the kits were supplied with a little jig that went on either end of the wing that kept the wing in that perfect shape while you finish the bottom side. Unfortunately, this does not supply you with any information on that. So, I'll show you what I did. So we have the other wing panel here, and this one, obviously, I have sheeted the bottom. And it is, and you'll notice that all the tabs were on these sides of the ribs. The top is already sheeted. But look, I'm trying to rock that wing right now and it's not moving. Why is that? Well, I made these little jigs right here that go on both ends of the wing, and when I did it, I made very specific and accurate marks on each end of the wing and made these little jigs to fit perfect to those marks. So as you can see, it's got a little bit of a shake to it, but it's all right. And the reason for that is this keeps the wing perfectly in the shape that they were sheeted to from the top side, but also all I have to do is make these same marks on my other wing. These are just tack glued on there, a couple of drops of medium CA. I just pop those off, tack glue them to the other wing, and we're good to go. So that way both wings are going to be absolutely identical. So as you can see there, very simple. They don't move around. It keeps the wing locked in that shape, and that's exactly what we want. So that turned out really well. Once again, no final sanding, no filling, just sheeting. I try to get it as, relatively smooth while it's, rather secured to my building board. But you don't want to get too carried away with it right now. Of course, before I sheeted the bottom, I had to make my pockets for the aileron servos. And I do these so simple stupid that it's ridiculous. Let me slide one of these bad boys in here. It's amazing how much more difficult this becomes to do with one hand. And you can see the mounts are flush with the ribs, but the cutout is done down to the mount. So the servo actually recesses in an 1/8 inch. So it kind of gives it a little bit, a little bit of a cleaner look. There's so many better ways to do it if you want it to look better. Like actually putting a door and all that stuff in there. But, this is just a monocoated airplane when it's going to be done. But yeah, that looks pretty good. Rock solid. Oh man, we are looking at volume 2 of the old RC Video Magazine series. And this is at the 1984 or 85 QSAA in Las Vegas. Fantastic. Looking at a YB flying wing. I think it's the YB-35. Fantastic. God, I miss those days. Anyways, so I'm going to move this wing out of the way, and I'm going to bring the other wing inside so we can take a better look at the guts, because I sheeted the bottom of this one yesterday, so this one is now completely finished. And you notice, because of those little jigs, when I set it down on my bench, perfectly stable and perfectly flat every time. Alright, hang on. Alright, so now we're looking at the other wing panel, which the bottom has not been sheeted. So what we have is, you can see my method for mounting the aileron servos is so simple stupid. I mean, literally 2 hard points and just a little cross piece here to offer some support for the sheeting right next to the servo. And some will look at this and go, no, 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 this has to be epoxied in, you got to glass it, you got to put triangle stock, you got to do all this, that's going to fall out. No, no, it is not. Because right now, it's already, you know, this is not a light wing, by the way. It's already extremely strong. And once the sheeting goes over top, the sheeting is also locking these rails in. So it's not going anywhere. I've been doing this method for years. I've never had one break, even after a crash. Paper tubes put in for the servo wires. That's all good to go. So yeah, this one I'm planning on sheeting today. Maybe, if I feel like it. Yeah, you can see maybe where the tabs used to be on those ribs. These are cut and sanded at this point. But yeah, as you can see, if I tried to sheet this wing right now without those jigs, there's nothing to keep it centered on the bench. So it needs to sit perfectly flat so I can properly sheet it. And for sheeting, hold on, let me flip this around. Not sure what you're seeing right now, I apologize. Trying to do everything one-handed and I don't want to break everything. Everybody has their own methods for applying their sheeting. Even when I'm doing a fully sheeted wing, I always start out like a wing that was being cap stripped. So in other words, this area here is going to be sheeted following the angle of the trailing edge of the wing. And I do the leading edge to the front spar. And the grain is also following the angle of the leading edge of the wing. And then the sheeting in the center is obviously following basically your spar line. So what we have is, we have sheeting going this way, and this way. So that adds a lot more strength to the wing. Typically, you would put all your sheets together, and then you would cut them out to the actual shape of the wing, put a bunch of glue on there, lay the sheeting over top with about 17 million pounds of weight holding it down. I've never had good luck doing that. The only time I've ever been able to really sheet a wing in one piece is when doing a foam wing, where you actually have the outer cores to lay on it. So once I do the leading edge and trailing edge, then I go in and I lengthen my sheets to where they need to be, and I'll do one sheet at a time. Using just Gorilla Wood glue, non-expanding. Put the glue on the ribs, set it on, pin it in place, move on to the next one, glue it, pin it in place, move on to the next one. It goes really quick. And this might look like there's gaps, and there is a gap, but it's completely filled in. There's no actual holes there. And when you have a situation like that, what I like to do is make yourself a nice throwaway sander. I mean, this is just made from some leftover sheeting with some 150 glued to the bottom. Nice and flat, works good. So for this area here, because there was some gaps because I didn't cut it right, I didn't want to waste that sheeting. So once I had it all glued into place, I went over and I sanded the area lightly to get some sawdust in there. And then I do a little bead of the wood glue right onto that seam. So now that wood glue is mixing with that sawdust. Then once that's on there, just take a sacrificial piece of sheeting, lay it on there, and literally flatten it and trowel it in there. And that is 100% smooth. Not the prettiest to look at, but that's my bad. It should look more like this. But yeah, that's my bad. But that's solid. And the reason that works so good is because your typical wood glues that are water-based really soaks into the wood and really makes it nice and strong. So that's just a really good way to do it. And it's going to be a lot less filling too. Talking about filling for a second, when you're covering an airplane, especially with a monocoat type material, not so much fabric. Fabric you can get away with a little bit more because it's thicker. But when you're covering with a monocoat or ultracoat type material, your surface has to be so perfect. Um, it has to be really, really nice and smooth. Because if I was glassing this airplane, I wouldn't even worry about these little bumps that I have here and there. Because once I put the glass on, the 2 layers of resin, which is also going to help flow everything out, and then primer, filler, more primer, everything is going to level out. When covering, my covering is only going to be as smooth as this balsa surface is. So what I'm going to do is kind of similar to when you're drywalling. Anywhere I have a seam where 2 pieces of wood have been put together, I'm going to just put a little bead of this lightweight filler on there. So before I even final sand this wing, I'm going to do that first. And it's just going to be a little bit. So when I'm done, it's going to look like this. There's just a little bit there. So that way everything will be nice and smooth, be blended nice. So that way the covering will turn out the best. So yeah, that is where we are at. Everything is going pretty well. Having some pretty bad waviness issues, especially in the ailerons. I'm glad this is sheeted with 1/8 inch balsa because that gives me a little more room for sanding. But I'm a little, I wouldn't say I'm concerned at this point, but it's gonna take a little bit of work to get it nice and smooth. But it is what it is. Looking good. So we'll take one last look at the fuselage here before we sign off. As you can see, once the plane is completely finished, this is going to be one large piece of airplane in one small piece of basement. You see the other big Chipmunk I have fits up there in the racks real nice. Even one hanging from the ceiling ready to go. This one here is going to have some very mobile floor parking. I'm just going to have to move this one around as I need to get around. But that's all right. All right. Like I said, we're creeping in closer to summer here, so I just want to keep all the progress on this airplane evened out. In other words, now that I have one wing completely sheeted, I'm going to get this wing into the same position. Then I'll probably put this away for a while. So I'm going to work on it off and on throughout the summer, but even though I don't plan on flying that much this year, probably even less than last year. And last year I didn't fly very much at all. So yeah. When it's nice out, motorcycle, exercising, all that stuff is taking priority over spending time down here. But I will work on it a little bit throughout the summer, and I will keep you posted. First flying event that will be done by video this year will be the Warbirds and Classics over Michigan, which is just a touch over a month away. Stay tuned. I plan on, how many events am I going to do this year? I think only 2 Warbird events again, to be honest with you. I'm not sure. I'm only registered for 2 events so far, and I think that's all there's going to be. You know, gas is going to be going back up to around $5 a gallon again this summer. Thanks, Brandon. You're the best. So that's going to, unfortunately, keep me homeward bound for a while. But, oh well. It is what it is. I got other things to keep me busy. That's the positive side to, being in this hobby for over 30 years, is I'm totally okay taking a break from it for a while. So, not a big deal. Plenty of other things to do. All right. Well, till the next time. Later.